What went wrong in Emery's first year? Was it bad management, a subpar squad, impatient fans, or not enough support from the club? Hi everyone, my name's T, and welcome to In-Depth Arsenal. If you like regular insight and intelligent debates about Arsenal Football Club, then click on the subscribe button below. It was Friday the 20th of April 2018, and the news was announced that Arsene Wenger would be stepping down. Thus the 2018-19 Premier League season would be the first for Arsenal under a new manager since 1996. Fans were divided. Some were pleased with the news, finishing 37 points behind the champion City, and no Champions League football for the second consecutive season was just too clear a sign for a time for change. However, some loyalists felt he was still the man for the job. But the decision was final. The Wenger era was over, and Arsenal would be writing a new chapter. But who would replace him? And more importantly, would anything at the club really change? Would Arsenal finally spend some money? Would Arsenal start competing for the best players in the transfer market? The season ticket price and stadium size alluded to Arsenal being a big club. Would they start acting like it? Would its first 11 have a strong enough spine that could not only play football, but win dirty and hard if necessary, without sustaining a casualty at crucial parts of the season? Would Arsenal have enough of a squad to bring on quality for quality, rather than throwing in an inexperienced youngster who's barely played 30 top-flight games? Were the days of getting humiliated by our rivals at away games over? Can we challenge for the league properly again? Those were the questions on most Arsenal fans' minds. But indeed a few still pined over Wenger's departure. And for some, the last fancy pass by Ozil. Being unbeaten 15 years ago seemed to be enough for some before, but reality was catching up to fans finally. Arsenal was underachieving, massively. Regardless of the circumstances, the club had gone from competing for the number one prizes to just competing to get into Europe. That 15-year decline could not be undone in a day's work. Still, hiring a new manager would be taking the first step, and speculation over who that candidate would be was rife, particularly at the semi-finals of the Europa League home game, as pictures circulated of Simeone stood solemnly behind our CEO, Ivan Gazidis. Would it be Allegri from Serie A champions Juventus? Joachim Low from the German national team? Or perhaps we would entice Luis Enrique out of retirement? Some lofty names were being thrown about. Had the average fan slipped back into Wonderland again? Well, why not the best managers in the world? We'd seen the clubs with half Arsenal's history and reputation hire great managers over the years. So why can't Arsenal? We are one of the richest clubs in the world. We pay the highest ticket prices. We've won titles. We've got a 60,000-seater stadium. Is it wrong to expect a manager of that stature? Only the club can answer these questions. And they did when they released a statement through its CEO stating clearly what they were looking for and how they had put in place the right amount of experience to make sure that they got things right. However, one line in the statement seemed concerning. What we have to do is that we don't lose Arsene's qualities and his values within the club, and that we take them forward. A touching tribute to the legendary manager, or a clear statement of intent. Particularly as he then went on to mention the academy players and how the appointment of Wenger was off the radar. Already it appeared the club were trying to cool expectations. If fans didn't get onto this, then the media certainly didn't miss the opportunity to bash Arsenal. And it was no surprise as the links in the news began to change. Candidates now included managers no longer in their prime: Ancelotti, Benitez, ex-players Patrick Vieira, Thierry Henry, Arteta, and up-and-coming managers such as Tuchel and Jardim. All options, each bringing something to the table, but still leaving fans wondering, was this the catalyst of change they envisioned? The answer is, yes, it should have been. If you accepted the objectives set out by the people who run Arsenal Football Club, the objectives they spelt out to fans several times from day one. What we have to do is we don't lose Arsenal's qualities and his values within the club. One of those values was running a self-sustained club, which the club is desperate to uphold. Clearly. Okay, that's fine. But how does that affect the recruitment process, you wonder? Why does running a self-sustained club hinder our chances at an elite manager? Well, let's put things into perspective. To prize a top manager away from their current commitments takes a fair bit of cash. And also the project has to be something ambitious. Well, Arsenal was on 11 million a year at Arsenal, which next to Guardiola at the time was one of the top fees in the world for a manager. So most managers would undoubtedly be attracted to Arsenal if the wages was the only concern. Okay, but what about the project? Can I realistically challenge for top honours is the question on managers' minds. Is the squad good enough for me to achieve my best work? If not, then will I be given money to improve the squad? When those questions are put forward, does the project at Arsenal really seem an attractive one for an elite manager? Perhaps I'll do another video for that. But to sum it up quickly, City, for example, who had just finished fourth in the 2016 season, guaranteeing them Champions League football, with players like Aguero, Company, David Silva, Kevin De Bruyne in the squad, a transfer kitty of 204 million to spend in the coming window. You can start to get a picture of the kind of projects that elite managers are looking for. Yes, you could say that it just seems a bit too easy, but ask yourself, is it really easy? Look at how Jose Mourinho would go on to fail at United. That was a similar easy project. So it's not just as easy as chucking money at it. There are still other aspects that come into play. The overall point is to minimize the chance of failure in a league as competitive, as lucrative as the EPL. These caveats must be met. Unfortunately, these caveats cannot be met by a club using the self-sustained model, by just simply relying on matchday revenue and kit deals. It either requires additional investment from an owner, or there is a much harder way. But the club has to be spot on in every department for this harder way to work. Purchasing of players must be correct. Selling of players must be on point. Outstanding football performances must be on point as well. Only one club has proven to have done it in the modern era, and that's Liverpool. To Arsenal's defence, they have been very, very clear to anyone who would listen. They would stick to their self-sustained model even after Arsenal. So this ruled out your Enrique and Allegri's, who now looking back would never have come to Arsenal, with the potential of working with Ronaldo or coaching your national team on the horizon. Who's going to reject those projects? But back to the Emirates, where when you put it all into perspective, it starts to make sense why the front runner was, yes, Mikel Arteta. Some pundits who have accepted the direction Arsenal are moving in hailed it a brave but understandable move by the club, as they felt the brand of football Arteta would bring to the table would match that of the ethos that the CEO claimed was behind the decision making. But other pundits saw this as the same old ambitionless Arsenal, going for the easier to control, cheaper option again. It wasn't long before the more humorous links like Eddie Howe, Brendan Rodgers, and in some corners Alan Pardew started to circulate, further solidifying our banter club reputation. It was a surprise in the community at the end of 2017-18 season when news started to bubble that Unai Emery, who had just left his position at PSG, had uploaded a graphic on his website, which he later deleted, proclaiming himself as Arsenal manager. Some felt Gazidis got cold feet and went for the safer option. Others pointed out Emery's failures at PSG. Yes, the Premier League is a more challenging conquest than League One, but City hadn't achieved more in the time that Unai Emery was manager at PSG, so it wasn't really a failure. Ah, yes, that night at Barca where he blew the 4-goal lead. But that's football sometimes. Hardly enough to define a manager's whole career. Then there was, of course, the Europa League specialist comments. But Arsenal are a Europa League side. Let's be honest. So surely the best way to get to the Champions League was to have a Europa League specialist on our side. Anyway, the club confirmed Unai would be Arsenal's head coach. This was another important factor to understand as a fan, because fans were a bit confused, and some are still till this day, as to what a head coach really is. Well, a manager has complete control in player contracts, staff, transfers, and of course the first team. A coach only trains and picks a team. So this immediately rules Emery out of responsibility of transfers and contract situations. Obviously they would seek his opinion, and yes, he may be the first person to present the news to the press, but it's important to understand Emery's role has already been clearly outlined by the club as different to that of Arsene Wenger, who oversaw everything until his final season. Yes, it's just a title, but the title is clear. Emery must hit his targets with what he's given. It was also released that Emery wowed the Arsenal board with his in-depth knowledge of the club and player analysis, which included how he would improve them and build his squad around Oba and Ramsey. Note, no mention of the club's star player by wage and reputation, Mesut Ozil, which was also more foreshadowing of issues to come. After all, you wouldn't go to Barcelona and say you were going to build a team around Suarez and Coutinho without mentioning Messi. Anyway, hearing all of this, you wouldn't blame the average Arsenal fan for starting to believe again. However, putting things into perspective again, this was a group of players that just finished sixth in the league. How was he going to get more from them? Was there some special training method he would implement? Or perhaps a new tactic he could try? Or maybe he was going to say some magical words that would spark some much needed mentality in the players. I've often heard the saying, you can't turn a donkey into a racehorse. If that's true, then why did people think otherwise? And just to make matters worse, the news of the £50 million budget started to circulate. So Unai Emery, who is a top manager, not an elite manager, has to turn a top 6 team into a top 4 team with a £50 million investment, when the team that finished one place above him spent £210 million to strengthen their team, and some teams below him spent £89 million, and of course the champions spent the exact same amount. This is already sounding like a miracle task. But wait, someone else has proved it can be done. Liverpool and Klopp. Although a lot of people look to compare the two self-sustaining clubs, it's actually unfair to do so, as running this type of method in a competitive money-driven league is very tricky, and every decision is key, from purchases of players to contracts to staff and performances on pitch. They all have to be handled very carefully, as I mentioned earlier. You fail or make a mistake in one of these areas and it affects every other area, in some cases long term. Unfortunately, the mentality that runs through both clubs differ, and that has played a big role in the decision making on and off the pitch, which has thus led to different outcomes from both self-sustained clubs, who one can say at some time in the recent past were both at the same level. I will delve into Arsenal's mentality issues in a future video, but briefly to touch on a few things. Liverpool have a majority of its ex-players who are actually fans of the club employed at senior positions. Hiring ex-players, particularly the successful ones, was a big no-no for Arsene Wenger. And I'm sure every Arsenal fan will state that no one at board level is a true Arsenal fan. This has in turn proved vital for Liverpool, as they have more often than not made the correct decision at key points in their recent history, in order to succeed as best as one can using the self-sustained model. Not selling Suarez to a rival, and tying up all the assets to long-term contracts, thus demanding high transfer fees, are just some of the examples. Whereas the decision-making at Arsenal under the previous regime was blunder after blunder, with a few glimpses of hope, which would then be followed by another catastrophic blunder. The overall point is, when Liverpool appointed Klopp, he wasn't an elite manager, just a very good one. Yes, he had won a title and a domestic cup and gone on a great Champions League run, but whether you would class that as an elite manager compared to the likes of Jose and Pep, who have won several titles at different leagues, and also the Champions League, is one for future debate perhaps. Regardless, the similarities between Klopp and Unai were still evident. They both had potential to go on to be elite managers if given the right project. Both managers were able to win things without having the best starting 11 on the pitch. But more importantly, both managers had just come out of a disappointing situation, with Klopp's not so good final season at Dortmund that led to his resignation, and of course for Unai, that game against Barca, and obviously not lifting the Champions League for PSG. But the difference between both appointments was that Liverpool fans could rest assured that the manager would be given the best opportunity and support to work in, because they could trust that the decisions made at board level would be the ones in the best interest for the club to succeed on the pitch. But for Arsenal fans, could we really trust this board to put the right things in place for Unai Emery to succeed? Well, let's put Liverpool to the back of our minds, as they will be key in my Does the Self-Sustained Model Work video. Back to Arsenal, and fans seemed shocked at the transfer budget. Why was it such a surprise to some though? Perhaps fans were still getting carried away with the backroom staff changes. They assumed this was the signalling of a change in policy too. But they were wrong. There was no change in policy. It didn't matter if the league champions spent 69 million to improve the title-winning squad. It didn't matter if this was the second consecutive year in the Europa League, or that the club had not won a title for over 10 years. The board continued to make things clear to the fans. They were willing to change staff, but not willing to change the financial model. So once again, Arsenal were going to be totally reliant on the head coach to have the golden touch and turn a six-league position team of players into something more. And this time, there was also the head of recruitment who would add the diamond eyes to find bargain deals that would equate to pricey purchases by other teams above and below us. There was a bit of assurance from the departing manager, who said, "Believe in these players." It's a shame they did not repay him for his blind belief, perhaps. Or maybe he wasn't the right man to turn donkeys into racehorses, but Emery is. Or has no one ever thought buying an actual racehorse might be easier? That would involve spending lots of money, and there clearly isn't any at Arsenal to spend. But why is that when newly promoted teams can spend 100 million? More was revealed as the season progressed, and with pre-season next on the agenda for Emery, we will continue on why Emery failed to reach his objectives in our next video.